Alright, welcome to the second part, building weapons. No need for an intro, we did that in the last video, which is in the description if you missed it. Let's just get into it. Now, in an effort to find out how Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is taking advantage of the PlayStation 5, I spoke with Adam Noonchester, lead gameplay programmer at Insomniac Games. The Ratchet and Clank franchise is one that is known for its crazy guns, and Noonchester thinks that the team's approach to making GATs in this one has yielded some of the best arsenals in the entire franchise, which is a bold claim, but from what I've seen, I think he's onto something. It's fascinating to hear how they iterated and developed these weapons. Firstly, Noonchester and his team try to evaluate all of these prospective guns along three axes that are: how spectacular is this weapon to use? Does this weapon fulfill a unique strategic niche in combat? And how humorous or unique is this weapon? Many of Insomniac's best weapons excel in more than one of these categories. A quick example being the Negatron Collider. The player is able to charge up a devastating beam that penetrates through enemies and lasts long enough that they can effectively just sweep it across the battlefield. All of the effects on the charge up, plus the big giant beam, make for some truly spectacular and satisfying moments in combat. Also, the duration of the beam, coupled with the sweeping ability, makes the Negatron Collider into quite a tactically interesting weapon. Another boomstick worth mentioning is the Enforcer, a double-barreled shotty that you can decide whether or not to shoot single-barrel or dual-barrel output. Similar to how Returnal has this sort of two-stage L2 adaptive trigger for aiming, how far you yank R2 down determines what erupts from the barrels. Doing it this way allows the Enforcer to fit a strategic niche of being good close range, but you can quickly choose to focus on crowd control or more focused DPS. In what is music to my ears, I'm told that this two-barrel shotgun can be fully upgraded from the Enforcer to the Executor. That'll be 4 barrels of plasma-based pain. I'm putting in my pre-order to Miss Zircon right now.
Yo-ho, our time has finally come! Let us plunder like mad and go break bad, for the fixer is all but done!
Look here, mateys, this looks useful. In fact, I've a notion that it be crucial.
It seems fate has brought us together again, ma petite rivette.
Guess fate really loves seeing you get your butt kicked, Pierre.
Ah! Yoo-hoo! Pirate mateys, attack!
Oh dear, the pirates are raiding for scrap.
You can't let them get that hurl shot.
Perhaps it would be worth using the high ground here.
Good idea. Ah, shields! Looks like we're gonna have to get creative.
Oh, the way you fight, Raven! But you should have seen the fixer! Such power! For the last people!
Did you talk him to death or what?
I would love to take the credit, but no. The cause of the fixer's brokenness is a mystery to me. I will enjoy his absence, however.
That's all of them. Let's get that hurl shot down. We've got the hurl shot. Now we just have to get across that pirate-filled chasm and find the fixer.
Finally, I'm brought up to speed on a gun called the Ricochet. This puppy fires a metal ball that will just impact an enemy and then pop up next to them, at which point you can just pull the trigger again to punch back down into their heads. Each shot can be ricocheted multiple times before returning to the gun. Plus, there's this subtle little mechanic where timing your trigger yanks, as the ball opens, will allow you to dish out some extra damage. Insomniac says, and I kind of agree, it's unlike any other gun that we've seen before, especially when you designate a target and then zip behind cover to effectively keep delivering free shots from absolute safety. It's going to be a ton of fun to use. Better yet, Noonchester highlights how he and his team are upping their game with regards to core weapon feedback and gameplay. Since 2016 Ratchet, the goal has been to make combat feel more impactful and modern. This includes things like an auto strafe functionality where you don't have to constantly squeeze a trigger to get sideways in a gunfight. We've also put more chunks coming off of enemies to better convey damage, Noonchester tells me. We've also added an ammo bar to the reticle, and we've also adjusted the position and framing of both the strafe and the aim camera to better suit our gameplay. This positioning varies with weapon archetype, plus we've also added a camera shake and recoil to every weapon. Something else that I reckon is worth mentioning, you may have noticed in the pre-release footage that there's this sort of new depth of field when you ADS to a target. And that's something that really makes the enemy that you're aiming at just pop off the background. It's going to help you because there's so much going on in these worlds. Last but not least, the DualSense's adaptive triggers have been put to good use elsewhere. Your mainstay blaster, the burst pistol, comes with 2 modes of fire, a slow but accurate mode and a fast but inaccurate mode. Once again, it's all done via one trigger via 2 distinct sections of resistance. An even better example of this is how the Negatron is handled. Back in the day, you may have had to hold the trigger down for a certain amount of time, or they might have tried firing when you released the trigger, or maybe the idea would have been to hold one button to start charging and then press another to deploy. Here, and with the adaptive trigger, you just pull until you feel a little bit of resistance, and then the gun will just start to charge. And then, once you pull through that resistance, the weapon's going to fire. This way, the risk-reward nature of a charge-up firearm is preserved, and, the player still has the tactical choice of when to fire the weapon, or just cancel it entirely. Either way, I can't wait to dish out some gunishment in this game. Looks like a hell of a lot of fun.
We're making a scuttle our own ship! Cut them down, mateys!
You could attack from a different angle by tethering to those rifts.
Keep them coming, Pierre! I'm just waiting for you to come down and fight for yourself!
I should have known scuttling you fools would be too easy! Or it is a fools are into fixer.
Were you saying something, Pierre? I stopped listening.
How will I go on without my greatest?
Good thing you'll never have to find out.
You and your adorable sassy backpack then! No chance!
Sassy backpack.
You guys aren't very good at this.
To hear more about gameplay variety, I sat down with Mike Daly, game director of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. The first thing we touch upon is the Rift Tether, which effectively just lets you connect to any Rift portal that sprouts up into the environment. You then yank it towards you, and then portal into another world. Interestingly, Rifts have their very own distinct audio signature, and you can really sense the Rift coming towards you, and then surrounding you with that 3D spatial audio. This audio signature is complemented by a haptic expression on the DualSense, where the haptics just have this pulsing wave effect that washes over your hands. Thanks to the grunt of the PS5, Insomniac has the power to fully render 2 incredibly beautiful worlds at one time. Daly tells me that ripping yourself from one dimension to the next has been designed to be a veritable feast for your senses. And you know what? It is. Next up, I get a look at the Phantom Dash, which is touted as a huge difference in the core gameplay. When pressed, it effectively allows your Lombax to phase out of reality for a moment and get a burst of speed in any direction. You can use it to ghost through enemies, be momentarily immune to the surly bonds of gravity, and better yet, this move is just super responsive and plays well with your other actions, allowing you to flow just right in and out of it. Daly calls it a foundational change to both combat and traversal flow. This time around, when we were thinking about what we could do with the adaptive triggers, we got this idea that maybe we could make them like rollerblades, Daly tells me. You could give a kick to build up speed using satisfying physical resistance on the triggers, and since the cadence of your kicks determines how fast you go as a player, you now have a lot more flexibility on your top speed that makes the hover boots super useful, both for tightly controlled traversal challenges and conveniently covering vast distances for our biggest planets. It's also worth noting that I'm told the aforementioned gadgets are really put through their paces in pocket dimensions. I'm told that if you really snoop through these, you'll find entrances that you can basically just tear open with your rift tether. Inside, you'll find stuff that's been sucked across from all throughout the galaxy, and then suspended in space-time. Practically speaking, that allows Insomniac's designers to go a little bit off the rails with concentrated designs that really lean into the unique features of a particular moveset or gadget. Why else would you bother with pocket dimensions? Armor for one thing, says Daly. Acquiring fancier pants, or a fancier shirt or helmet, will give you passive statistics benefits, and that's whether or not you put it on your character and change their appearance. 3 different types of armor can be slapped on at one time, and these can be mixed and matched freely, and then each type has its own unique color palette assigned, giving you a fair amount of cosmetic control. That fact, combined with the obligatory, fully featured first-party Sony game photo mode, means you can save some very happy snaps. I only got to see it at a glance, but there seems to be just tons of options for cameras, lighting, and pose expressions. I hope Insomniac's ready, because I'm going to make like Star-Lord and make some weird stuff with this thing. In addition to gadgets, a new feature Insomniac is bringing to the table are mounts. I'm told that the controls of these rideable critters have been tuned to be more fluid and have this sort of animalistic feel. Daly says they're targeting the sensation of riding a wild beast. DualSense haptics are going to sell that experience a little bit better as well, plus some work has been done with 3D spatial audio cues to make it sound like crap is just whipping past your head at a fantastic speed. Another type of character you control in the game is Glitch the Arachnodroid. Originally, this little beastie was born out of an internal Insomniac game jam, as a powerful rideable robot bristling with armaments. At some point we thought, well, what if we made this a character instead of a vehicle, says Daly. Glitch could have a personality, even a little bit of story. We also knew that we needed Ratchet to have a way to mix up gameplay and to get through some computers blocking your way. More specifically, she helps you disinfect computers, and her gameplay revolves around sort of striking a balance between fast action running and gunning against large numbers of viruses, and a simple but satisfying 3D navigation challenge where you have these sort of mind-bending shapes you have to navigate. Our favourite metal sidekick gets his own time to shine as well, obviously. Clank's role is to enter the supports between dimensions and puzzle a way to channel the dimensional energy from one end to the other. Interestingly, he can visualise this dimensional energy as possibilities, little Clanks that look like him. Basically, you have a toolkit of energy orbs that you can deploy into the environment that can change the physics properties of these client possibilities, or environmental objects, or even Clank himself. Look, it's all going to make sense once you're there, with tutorial pop-ups, I promise. Daly insists the puzzles are novel and satisfying to solve now. Furthermore, with each game, Insomniac aims to reach a broader and broader audience. If you have a sensory impairment, or you're a player who doesn't quite meet the dexterity threshold or the timing threshold to get through Rift Apart, we've added a lot of assist features, mentions Daly. Probably one of the most dramatic of which is a global time slow. This is something that you can assign to a D-pad shortcut if you want, and at the tap of a button, whenever you're in a tight spot that you don't think you can handle, just slow the game down to complete the challenge at your own pace. You now have time to process the controls and the dangers, and then return right back to normal when you're done, so that the game resumes its brisk pace. Daly tells me that when you add all of these features together, Rift Apart should be more fun for everybody and playable by a broader audience than any other game in the series.
I be honored to blaspheme myself, your scraggly neck will pester Pierre no more. And your tail will be a fine swab for our gangs. and so shall ye! Just a crack!
Next up I hear from Mike number 2, Mike Fitzgerald, Director of Core Technology, about how the PS5 tech has been leveraged above and beyond simply making loading times faster or the resolution eyeball searing. We really tried to develop some new transformative game content and new experiences for the player, Fitzgerald tells me. So while the Ratchet and Clank franchise is not considered an open world game, we've set up almost all of the planets to constantly stream content in and out as you move through them, just as an open world title like Spider-Man would. Now do not get too excited with that comparison, as I'm told Insomniac's planetoids are way smaller than the island of Manhattan. At least the playable parts of it anyway. Using some clever streaming techniques, a ton of art content can be brought to bear in not much time at all. Getting from title screen to game is instantaneous, but in other spots you'll see transformative load times where our heroes get sucked through rifts and portals and straight into another world or dimension in well under a second. As mentioned before, basically Insomniac is running two versions of the same place at the one time, and you're constantly jumping back and forth between them as you play the world. Each is there in full fidelity thanks to all of the considerable PS5 memory available to these designers. No tricks here, Fitzgerald assures me. When it's time to switch between them, it'll happen in the span of a single hammer swing. While we still do have some gorgeous sweeping spaceship flight cinematics between planets, mentions Fitzgerald, it's never to cover load times. It's only when it's useful to drive the story forward. Interestingly, we even leverage the ability to render two full fidelity scenes at one time in some in-engine cutscenes, sort of to do these classic sci-fi wipes between two real-time rendered shots, which is just a really nice addition to the presentation. Fitzgerald is also keen to point something out about the new Topiary sprinkler weapon, a gun that effectively turns enemies into a hedge version of themselves. I'm told that Insomniac actually generates these plant models of every single enemy, and they're very dense in terms of textures and verts. In a non-PS5 Ratchet, they would have had to reserve a ton of memory for these models. A veritable hedge fund of assets, if you'd like, and then just have it sitting around in the background. With the power of the SSD, Fitzgerald says that these models don't even need to be loaded in until one frame before an enemy gets affected by it, whereupon it just streams in and then out, as needed. No compromises. In closing, Fitzgerald mentions that he and his team have had a blast using all of this new tech to really change the shape and content of this game. They're not just loading stuff faster or adding more pixels to it. Anyway, do be sure to join me in the next video, which is entitled Sights and Sounds. And to be fair, I could have titled it Mind-Blowing Sights and Sounds. See you there.